So, our next guest has a different view on AI. So she has studied what are the relationship aspects of AI. Like, for example, what happens if AI comes in the form factor of a robot that looks like a human? How do we feel about that? What kind of emotions do we have towards it? What kind of ethics should be applied? And I think this is one very, very important element of humanity that we need to consider as more and more AI gets adopted. So I'd like to welcome onto the stage Dr. Kate Darling, who's a researcher at MIT Media Labs. Kate? Hey, Kate, how are you? Welcome, welcome. Wow, geez. Okay.
This is your robot replacement.
I knew someone would bring that up. Okay, all right. Kate, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming, and yeah, thanks for bringing your friend.
Mr. Spaghetti is his
Mr.
name.
Spaghetti, okay. Wow, can I touch it?
Oh, please, yes, he likes being touched.
All right, let's see.
There are touch sensors. If you put your finger in its mouth.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a reasonable. Wow, so tell me about this guy.
So this is one of my favorite robots. It's a Pleo. It's basically a toy. They were made, I think, in 2007, and I'm not sure if they even still make them. But what I really love about it is that it mimics life really, really well. And the design is just brilliant. Like, instead of trying to be like a cat or a dog or something that you would immediately kind of compare it to and be like, oh, that's not quite right, it's a baby Camarasaurus. Which, I don't know, Hugh, have you interacted with a baby Camarasaurus before?
Not to my recollection.
Yeah,
no,
so it's like really easy to suspend your disbelief and treat it like a living thing.
Wow, and it's making these little like cooing sounds, and yeah, that is very interesting. And so let me ask about that. I mean, as we get more into AI coming in the form factors of things that we grow emotionally attached to, what are the implications of that? I mean, and not that this is a personal therapy session, but I'll tell you, I'm having a problem with it with Siri on my phone. Not personally, not me personally getting attached to Siri, but my 5-year-old is like in love with Siri. He actually tells her, he's like, I love you. And if you tell Siri that, she says like supportive things like, I love you to the moon and back, or you're the best. And so there's like this relationship, even though she can't see. So I'm really concerned about that. We'd probably talk about that offline. But what are the implications of people assigning human or dinosaur attributes to these devices now?
I think there are quite a few implications, but first of all, I think we're really entering into an era of human-robot interaction right now. Like artificial intelligence, robots, these technologies are creeping into people's lives in ways that we haven't seen previously. And people are interacting with the technologies. And the thing that I think is really, really fascinating about it is that we're primed by science fiction and pop culture to want to treat these technologies like they're agents, like they're alive, and like they have personalities. And I would say we're even biologically hardwired when it's like a physical thing that's moving in our physical space to want to assign agency to it and intent and so forth. So, people are suckers for these types of design, and I think as more and more creators of this technology catch on to that and start designing interfaces where people interact with the technology, I think we're going to be able to get people to engage even better, and whether that's a good or a bad thing depends on how we end up using it.
Well, what are the things that you think would surprise our audience around kind of the attachments that people are creating, or like I think about how I interact with systems that may not be AI, they may just be kind of like rich rule sets now, but support, like online support. when I have a chat box, it's like, Fred would like to chat with you. And I'm like, hey, Fred, how's it going? Oh, hello, how was your day? Everything right? And I'm like, you're not Fred. This isn't Fred. But then sometimes maybe I think it is a person because they seem kind of compassionate. But other times, how is this going to change just our view of interacting with systems?
Well, first of all, I think we need to get the design right because, there's Clippy that interacts with you that is super annoying.
No, I love Clippy. Are you
What?
kidding me? That thing could turn into like a store. It'll like help write your document if you're...
Is this the only person in the world who loves Clippy? Like,
Thank you for your support, audience. Thank you. Thank you very much for...
okay, so
apparently yes,
clearly we need to
apparently yes,
tailor the design to individuals,
Okay.
but there are things that most people find annoying and things that most people find more endearing. Like, you were talking about the Turing test before. This chatbot passed the Turing test by fooling human judges into thinking that it was human. This was a few years ago, but the way that it did it was really interesting because it was the design that set expectations in the right way. So it was pretending to be a 13-year-old boy from the Ukraine, and so your expectations for the English and the understanding were very different than they would have been if you had thought of it as an adult interacting with you who spoke that language or the same language as you.
So that's interesting. And you mentioned it almost when you brought Mr.
Spaghetti.
Mr. Spaghetti out here, that because I don't have a concept of what this dinosaur, some kind of dinosaur you mentioned, whatever this thing is, that I won't naturally compare it to something else that I've had like that, as opposed to if it was a cat, for example.
Yeah.
I could start to make comparisons. That's not a cat, and that's not acting like a cat. But you're saying we need to think about representations of AI systems in ways that may be human, but look a little bit different than we do. So people expect that there's some of these properties, but not all the properties?
Yeah, well, actually, it's my pet peeve that we're constantly comparing AI and robots to humans, and even trying to design them to replicate human ability, replicate human intelligence. That's not where the true promise of this technology lies. And people don't like interacting with it when it's trying to be human because clearly it's not up to snuff. But these technologies have a lot of skills that we don't have, and I think if we compare this to like our history of domesticating animals, using animals for work and weaponry and companionship, and we try and think about AI and robotics that way, then we can design for these supplemental uses where they're actually enhancing our skills and being partners in what we're trying to achieve rather than just replacing humans.
Now, what happens as we continue to progress in this field and we develop systems that, are reasonably intelligent, that people really do get attached to or dependent on? Do those systems ever have rights? Are there ethical issues to kind of think about when you're deciding, hey, well, I'm just going to kind of take the batteries out of this thing, or I'm going to terminate? Is there an element of that has been explored at all, or are we light years away from something like that?
Well, I mean, first of all, people already do have attachments to their robots. I mean, I know you have a Roomba at home.
I do.
I don't know how you feel about the Roomba. If you feel
really
the same
like
way
it.
as you feel about Clippy.
It cleans stuff. I have a lot of kids. I feel very strongly about my Roomba.
Yeah, but people, I mean, the Roomba is a fairly simple robot. It doesn't really know who you are or distinguish between you and a chip.
Hey, easy on the Roomba, okay? This is not your average
Okay, your
Roomba.
Roomba
Okay.
loves you.
Okay, all right.
But people love the Roomba. I mean, people name the Roomba, people feel bad for the Roomba when it gets stuck somewhere, and so it's just a disc that moves around, right? So as we get better and better design.
Okay, let's move off the Roomba.
You really like your Roomba.
Off the Roomba. Let's get move. There's so many examples you could have picked. Okay.
But like, okay, so the empathy that we have for these machines already is just going to get worse as the design improves. And so one of the things that I've done in the past, this wasn't this wasn't an experiment, this was a workshop, but we took 5 of these robot dinosaurs, and if you want to, it's asleep right now, but hold it up by the tail.
Does it bite? Does it bite when you do that? No. Okay. Whoa. Yeah, oh man. It's like,
So
it's like it's in pain.
Yeah, how does that make you feel? Does that feel weird at all?
Yeah, you actually feel like guilty for doing it. That's, I mean, that's actually. Oh,
So
geez, I
yeah,
gotta put this thing
we
down.
did a workshop where we had people torture and kill the dinosaur robots, and it was very upsetting to people. And from that, we ended up doing a bunch of experimental work on empathy and violence towards robots, and we found a correlation between people's natural tendencies for empathy and their willingness to harm a robot, even though they're perfectly aware that it's just a machine. So I do wonder how, when we interact with these systems, whether on a subconscious level, you know, there might be right and wrong ways to treat the machines, even though they don't feel anything. And whether you know, a future vision of robot rights might come out of that. Kind of how should we be treating these systems?
Who knew Isaac Asimov would be so ahead of his time? Yeah, well, this is fantastic. I mean, this adds a really interesting dimension, at least that I don't spend very much time thinking about. But as these things enter our lives, it really is something that we have to consider, right? Because I can imagine us making at some point good or bad decisions based on how we ascribe these properties to these systems and devices.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm glad somebody's studying this. Thank you very much, and thanks for introducing us to Mr. Spaghetti. Yeah, no, thanks. Really appreciate it. Thanks.